page 571. The fulfillment of the consciousness must not be searched for in the material, but rather in its evolution, from which also the spirit form gains evolutionary benefit, and this benefit carries itself into the creation universal consciousness and is in turn beneficial for its evolution. This, however, is a fulfillment of the consciousness evolution, which is far beyond all earthly matters, and which is carried far beyond your earthly existence. The fulfillment of your consciousness, the evolution, must live in you and be dynamic in you, because otherwise it has nothing in common with your consciousness. But the truth is that you, human beings of Earth of today, no longer know what your consciousness actually is, because on account of the wrong teachings of your wrong prophets, religions, ideologies, and philosophies, you have put the spirit, i.e., the spirit form, in its place, which you erroneously and wrongly assume to be responsible for your ideas, thoughts, feelings, as well as your activity, actions, and doing. But that is not the truth, because not your spirit, i.e., not your spirit form, is responsible for this, but your consciousness, for which and whose entire activity and the thereout resulting intellect and rationality you yourselves bear the full responsibility. Truly, your spirit, i.e., your spirit form, is not identical with your consciousness, and is not of an earthly material kind, but rather of a pure creational spiritual nature, and untouchable for you. Nevertheless, you erroneously assume that your consciousness given intellect and your rationality are of a pure spiritual nature, and with this assumption you cling to a traditional irrational teaching of a religious, ideological, and philosophical kind, which finishes off your intellect and your rationality and brings about a downfall into non-understanding and truth unknowledge, to which you cling and cannot perceive and recognize the real truth. Your earthly existence requires the fulfillment of the life sense, which consists of bringing your consciousness evolution to the highest possible level of love, knowledge, and wisdom. That is the sense of the life and the fulfillment, into which all furthering values of the consciousness development must be brought for the purpose of this, that therethrough also your spirit, i.e., your spirit form, can take over these high values to ultimately bring them into the creation universal consciousness, which as a result also evolves. But be conscious that all love, all knowledge, and all wisdom which you create for yourselves and which go over into your spirit, i.e., your spirit form, are always only relatively, absolutely, fully developed, as are also the love, the knowledge, and the wisdom of the creation universal consciousness. Truly, there is nothing absolutely fully developed, but only relatively absolutely fully developed, because everything is in constant motion and develops always further and higher, including you with your consciousness, your spirit, i.e., your spirit form, in its spiritual creational energy and power, and the creation universal consciousness in its spiritual energetic being. That is the truth which you must realize, recognize, and know, because this truth is an eternity value, an all-time value, and hence nothing that is only passing. And if you want to act, and howsoever you want to act, whatever you are striving for, and whatever you are making an effort for, always ask yourselves first whether the whole corresponds to the effective relative truth. Because truth, too, is not absolutely fully developed, but is always only relatively given, and indeed because the one truth always entails the next following truth. Because truly the truth is also in swinging motion, hence it constantly widens if new knowledge and new wisdom come to it. Therefore also the real truth of all truth is not absolutely, but only relatively absolutely fully developed, although for you human beings, it nevertheless builds the highest value of the currently fathomable and reachable truth, which, however, through the learning, can in turn be worked through with further knowledge and further wisdom to a new, relative highest level of the truth. Truly also the real truth of all truth is in constant swinging motion, because a widened knowledge and a widened wisdom lead to new truth cognitions, each of which, in its relative highest level, builds the real truth of all truth. Therefore, the real truth of all truth keeps widening further and further, and indeed entirely according to the increasing evolution, which also always reaches its highest relative level, which in turn reaches a new relative highest level when new knowledge and thereout resulting wisdom comes to it. The evolution of love, knowledge, and wisdom, as well as the real truth of all truth, thus never come to an end, but continue to increase ever further and higher into all duration of the endlessness. Therefore, if you want to act consciously, no matter what you are striving and endeavoring for, then ask yourselves about the true relative value and the relative real truth of all truth, which results out of the whole, so that you may really find everything in the right wise, and know that every real truth of all truth, as well as every value of the knowledge and the wisdom, is always only a level that leads to the next higher level, because through swinging motion, everything constantly develops further and never comes to an end in all endlessness of the endless duration. And all this is not all too difficult to understand if you only make a conscious and willing effort to gain the understanding. Do not rely on the wrong teachings of the religions, ideologies, and philosophies, and not on the useless striving for pseudo-cognitions of the same kind as they are presented to you, because truly they are a hindrance to the climb up to your consciousness evolution, because they prevent the truth fathoming in you and bring the motion to a standstill, and as a result, each progress and each development is thwarted and cannot be brought to success. Also, with regard to your sciences, you shall thoroughly think about them, because through them you cannot unfold your swings of the motions. Rather, they are badly curtailed and destroyed through them, because they run after wrong cognitions, and do not perceive and do not recognize the real truth of the creation universal consciousness and its laws and recommendations, nor their effects, but instead try to explain everything only on the basis of their scientific physical cognitions, which relate to the purely material factors, and do not pay attention to, nor understand, and consequently also cannot explain all the fine fluidal and spirit energetical. Truly, the whole truth of all truth does not lie in the material sciences alone, but fundamentally and first and foremost in the spirit energetical realm, which is created through the creation universal consciousness. And the truth of all truth does not lie in complicated physical, religious, ideological, political, and philosophical formulas, but in the simplicity of all things as they are given through the creational laws and recommendations. And therefore, the true simplicity also lies in the thoughts and feelings, and in the truthly activity of you human beings, which is in accordance with the creation. Just as the greatness lies in you yourselves, through which you unfold the might of your responsibility, and integrate it into the following of the laws and recommendations of the creation universal consciousness, which you shall strive for consciously and in love. But you humankind of earth, you have turned away from the creational truth, and instead turned to your religions, ideologies, philosophies, and your material sciences, and believe yourselves great in your purely material rationality and intellect-based knowledge. Truly, you have bound yourselves to your material sciences and your belief in gods, kin gods, and idolized human beings, and have obstructed yourselves against the real truth of the existence of the creation and its laws and recommendations. Consider this, of what use it is to you. If you squander away the time of your earthly life with the attempt of wanting to find out when and how such a tiny creature as a louse came into being, and how long it will continue to exist for, if you thereby completely forget to research the creational laws and recommendations, and to live according to them, and according to the truth which is given therein, truly your entire material searching and researching is of no use to you, if you leave the creational spiritual energy and power, and hence the highest possible truth of all truth, out of your attention. Truly, you must seriously and thoroughly examine one thing after the other to find out which value it brings you as excellence. And if you examine everything very accurately, then you will suddenly recognize that everything therein, that today does not take place according to the creational laws and recommendations, breaks down like a useless house of cards, and shows you that your earthly existence, which is given to you as a gift for your consciousness evolution, is, with regard to the evolution, the learning of the truth, the creating of the love, knowledge, and wisdom, truthfully much too precious to leave unused even for a single minute. Do not wallow in your vanity and your gambling, because they have nothing in them through which you would be able to raise yourselves evolutively and to the effective truth, because vanity and gambling are only empty and dead in themselves. Do not be megalomaniacal, and do not assume that you could raise yourselves up to the creation universal consciousness, because even if you become very knowing and wise, and can manipulate the life and change it through genetic engineering, you are nevertheless only creations, i.e., created creations, of the creation universal consciousness, and you will never get beyond that as material human beings. Truly, in the creational universal consciousness, in which you live as its creations, you shall complete, in fulfillment of its laws and recommendations, actions and activity of the evolution of your consciousness. Therefore you shall step out of your delusion, of your self-boastfulness, and fulfill your duty. If you look at and consider yourselves, then you are only like sounding ore with your wrong knowledge in the unknowledge of the effective creational truth of all truth, whereas your real existence should be an aliveness and a furthering of your evolutionary task. And if you enjoy life and thankfully direct your senses upon it and upon the truth, then you stand higher than those who knowingly take apart their existence and unconcernedly go forth without recognizing the greatness of the creation. Look around you, you human beings of Earth, because it depends on how you realize the life, your own activity, and your fellow human beings, and what they mean to you in reality, and what value they have for you. And if you look at and consider your life, your activity, and your fellow human beings, the nature and its life forms, as well as the whole world, then you only find little that is really worthy of a true humankind, because you have destroyed everything, your honor and dignity, your true being human, your life in accordance with the creational laws and recommendations, your forests, grasslands, wetlands, meadows, your creeks, rivers, streams, lakes, and seas, as well as your climate, just as you have exterminated many animals, birds, fishes, and all sorts of creatures, and continue to do so through your unintellect and irrationality, and your continued cultivation of the all-destroying overpopulation. Truly, you are like unusable servants in a paradisical garden, in which you destroy and eliminate everything, instead of taking care of it, building it up, and bringing it to the blossoming and bearing of good fruits. You waste your lifetime with vanity, egoism, hatred, jealousy, unpeace, unfreedom, and disharmony, with strife, war, lying, and deception, as well as with murder, manslaughter, torture, punishment, destruction, and extermination, but also with senseless gambling, thereby adorning your high ability, which lies in you as a creational gift, with cheap bric-a-brac, with wrong wishes, hopes, and desires of all kinds. Wake up, you human beings of Earth, so that you can create for yourselves a worthy consciousness evolution, and no longer go through life desperately poor with regard to your truth knowledge. Create for yourselves, through the finding and following of the truth of all truth, an inexhaustible treasure during your earthly life, so that you are in yourselves like king and emperor, and reign over your existence with the scepter of the true love, the knowledge, and the wisdom. Do not remain desperately poor in your truth knowledge, and do not think that the material knowledge alone is sufficient to further the evolution of your consciousness, because if you think in this wise, then you are unworthy of the life, and are king and emperor of your own inner darkness and unknowledge, so you childishly wield a scepter of the dalliance and illusion, and put on a crown of the arrogance and vanity, and therewith prove your lack of intelligence. What you necessarily have to research is, first and foremost, only all that which you need for the recognition of the truth in yourselves, and for the evolutive climb up of your consciousness, in which case you need the movement of the learning, which is of most important significance for the furtherance of your truth-finding and consciousness evolution. In everything you go about, do, and undertake, you must ask yourselves what advantage and value the whole brings for you yourselves, as well as for your fellow human beings. And it is necessary that you recognize your destination and fully adhere to it, so that you comprehend that you have to follow and fulfill it in your life. Truly, if you fulfill a great action on your world, then you will be honored, provided that you are not envied for it. Such glory usually stays with you till your earthly end, and often even beyond it over decades, centuries, or even millennia. But that is a pure human work of the remembrance, and often even of the glorification, and indeed not seldom with regard to a wrong understanding of the fact that human beings and their actions and their activity shall not be glorified, but only kept in honorable remembrance, and be thought of in dignity, wherethrough no glorification and no person or human cult shall be practiced. A glorification of human beings, gods, and tin gods is just as perverse as a glorification of the creation universal consciousness, which indeed represents, in its entire being, a magnificence, but shall not be glorified nevertheless. Used in connection with the creation universal consciousness, the term magnificence does not mean glorification, but grace, beauty, true love, fairness, and attraction, whereas glorification means worship, servitude, humility, cheering, and adulation. Glorification is the fruit of your wrong human view, your wrong assessment and erroneous evaluation of the reality, which you have made into a tradition and transfer to all and everything that you deem to be higher than yourselves. Your circling motion is extremely sluggish, which is why the interactions are only triggered slowly and not with easiness, so they generally only ensue step by step and no longer let you recognize the causes that lead to the interaction, from which you very often have to suffer, because they are of a negative, bad, and evil nature. The interactions which arise out of your motions of your thoughts and feelings, as well as out of your actions, deeds, and out of your entire activity, are always measured according to their viewpoints. Through your human view, you let so many thoughts, feelings, actions, deeds, and many activities appear great, even though they are truthfully insignificant and worthless, whereas you do not value so many other things, in which truthful greatness inheres, in their good and great excellence. The higher you develop the consciousness-based evolution, the easier and clearer your understanding, and the quicker your reward of the knowledge and the wisdom will be. Because your human consciousness rises faster and faster in its evolution if you consciously have a good volition thereto. And if this good volition is given in you, then even a single small and really good action pulls you in that moment upwards into the highest inner heights of the joy, peace, freedom, and harmony, and you can make use thereof in remembrance, out of which it follows that you climb higher and higher, and that you acquire new knowledge and new wisdom, together with your in you growing true love to yourselves, to your fellow human beings, to the life, to the creation universal consciousness, and to all its created creations, laws and recommendations, and to everything existing in every form.